This episode of the Better Every Shift podcast is brought to you by Lexipol, the experts in policy, training, wellness support, and grants assistance for first responders and government leaders. To learn more, visit lexipol.com. That's LEXIPOL.com. Now let's get into the show.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Better Every Shift podcast. My name is Aaron Zamzow. I am a firefighter, training officer, and author for Fire Rescue One. And my editor, the one that's the best that I've ever worked with, the closest to my heart, the captain of this podcast, Janelle Fosquet, is here. Janelle, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today, Aaron?
I'm good. I'm excited, a little stressed out. Obviously, that's part of the theme that we're going to be talking about today, because we have Battalion Chief with us today, Ben Thompson. Ben is an author of article for your, I shouldn't say for our FR1 special coverage on what firefighters want. Ben is a battalion chief in Birmingham, Alabama. He's been a longtime writer. How you doing today, Chief?
I'm doing well. Still getting used to being called Chief. So if you say it, I don't answer. I apologize.
Right. We'll have to stick to Ben, right? Like,
Yeah.
Well, congrats on being newly promoted and being a chief, and thanks for a great article, great insight onto what firefighters want. And real quick, what was the biggest surprise that you found when you started to look at some of this data that we got from the survey?
I guess the biggest surprise is how many people I actually agreed with. So, it's the biggest surprise. There was no surprise for me, for people I talk to, because it's, I don't want to get too deep into what the results actually were just yet, but that was, I kind of, I'm with you. I know exactly how you feel. So that's what it was.
Which is, I mean, it's good and bad, because I think, that means that the problems are pretty consistent, which means that solutions then may be a little bit, easier to come by because of more people being affected by it. But, the survey had 2,100 people. And I know what you mean. Sometimes you read these surveys and go, I don't know where they were surveying from, because I don't agree with it. But let's dig into it a little bit. First statistic or data point that really stood out to you.
The first statistic was, of course, the number one stressor for everybody nationwide was poor agency leadership. And, like I said, I wasn't overwhelmingly surprised, because I've had the opportunity to go to some national classes and talk to firefighters from all over the country. And, anybody's been to the National Fire Academy or any kind of conference, and you've sat down and shared a beer with somebody, you start seeing everybody has the same problems. So, that's what it goes to, is it's just like the kitchen table in the bar room in Indianapolis at FDIC. Everybody's going to say, yeah, it's the chiefs, it's the administration. It's always the same stuff. So, I saw that and was like, but to see a number to it, and a percentage, it's always a little startling, makes it a little more concrete than just, a conversation.
Yeah. And is that new, do you think? Or I guess what you're saying, it's never been, I think, this universal.
I don't know. I can't say it's new, because it seems like we've always been pointing our finger up, for every problem we have at the fire station. And it kind of makes me think, because they're not there to defend themselves. I had this, my first captain. Do you guys have Kelly days where someone's off? You have a shift off every 9 shifts.
Yeah, we do. We have Kelly days that kind of bring your work week down or your schedule down a little bit. And I know there's some departments up in our area that don't get Kelly days, but yeah, Kelly days to bring you either to a, I don't know, 52 or 48-hour work week. Yeah, we have them at my department.
So my captain told me the reason why we have Kelly days is so everybody else at the station has someone to talk about. So they're not there to defend themselves. So, and you think about it, administration, especially one that's not out in the field talking to the guys all the time, they're absent. So they're an easy target to blame for problems. So, I guess you could say the louder the people are blaming the agency leadership is probably directly reflected of how absent they are in the field,
Yeah. And that was my next question is, well, I think part of it is, you blame the person that's not there, but why are they not there?
Yeah.
Are they there? Are they not there because of poor leadership, or are they not there because they're overworked, or is it a combination? I mean, what's your thought on that?
So I don't know. So it's funny. So as a lieutenant, I had an opportunity that a lot of people have never had. I was basically pulled from duty to do a special project, do our community paramedicine program for our
Mhm.
department. And so I wasn't over any firefighters. I was over a project, and I did it for 3 years, and I worked my tail off. I mean, I was going to meetings, and I'm trying to get policies done and all this stuff. And I mean, I'm working really hard, and I started seeing success, but it wasn't being translated in the field. And I remember one day walking into a fire station to use the restroom because I was like in between meetings or something. And I see a firefighter with his phone out that didn't really know me. He just sees me pull up in a city car. I've got my nice white shirt on, and he looks at me and goes, huh, must be nice. And I'm like, you have no idea what I've done today. But
Mhm.
then I kind of had to look at it and say, well, what have I done to make them understand what I'm doing? So it's kind of, it's hard because as an administrator, you're really dealing with foreign policy, and you're being blamed for domestic issues because,
Mhm.
you're over at City Hall all the time working, you're fighting. But if you don't come back and, explain that to your crews, they have no idea what you're doing.
Well, I think that's interesting because we just had Dr. Candace Ashby on the show, and her whole theme is leadership from the bottom up because her point is, everyone blames up, but what are you doing to make change? And like you're saying, like what have I done to help them know or explain my role, for example, on this project? So I think that's an interesting theme we're seeing. But I also wanted to call out a couple quotes from your article related specifically to the poor agency leadership. One thing that connects with what you were just saying, this was from the free text. We asked firefighters to tell us why they selected this as their number one stressor. Um, this person said, we have no chief. Our department is run by the three-headed monster,
Mm.
mayor, city manager, and city attorney. And then we had another person say, my administration can't be bothered to go visit an employee hurt on the job in the hospital. I think, I mean, those are two very different aspects of the poor agency leadership, right? There's the just the political stuff, administrative stuff, but then there's the very real personal and human side of it, and if you don't believe in your chief or your chief officers to take care of their people, that is going to cause significant, significantly low morale.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've kind of gone through. I've had a fire chief in the past that was pretty absent. I've gone through the time where we were in transition and had no fire chief. We had an interim fire chief who was just kind of a placeholder. But he would tell you, I'm just here until they find a new person. And I don't know which one's more stressful, because it's because the interim is like, hey, you got the role, do something, but they didn't want to step on too many toes or get something going that they weren't going to be able to see through because they were about to retire. So I kind of feel folks who are feeling both sides of that. So but it's I don't know. Like I said, from my experience I had of working in administration and getting to see kind of the day to day, there are realities being dealt with by administrators that people in the field don't know, and really they really should know. I mean, that's it. That's kind of the role of the administrator, is to absorb those realities and those problems, um, to make it better for the crews. Unfortunately, I think sometimes it's so complicated, so difficult. Administrators get focused on that side of it only, and don't actually come back home and say, "Hey, this is what I've been doing for the last, you know, 3 years." That's
But sometimes I think that cup of coffee or that visit and maybe even the show of frustration on a Chiefs part about, "Man, I'm just trying to get this done for you guys," maybe brings it back down to a level where we feel like we're all on the same team. Um, and let's take staffing. I think we'll take that for an example. Poor agency leadership was one of the highest stressfuls of the job. Lack of staffing was another one, and you can look. I think at right away we think, oh, how come we're not hiring enough people? We're not hiring them fast enough. Well, hiring takes two teams or two different thought processes, right? Like, hey, I know 4 or 5 people, so I can promote my job to others just as much as leadership needs to hire them, right? So And when I talk about that, like I see you're kind of going, yeah, right. Like, I mean, what's your experience on that side of stuff, and what's your thought on that?
So I try my best to take response. If there's a problem that exists, the first thing I try to do is what can I do about it? What can I do?
Right.
And, with lack of staffing, all I can really do is try my best to bring good people in, because what we've learned is we've had some staffing issues. When you start bringing in too many people, sometimes you get the wrong people. And then sometimes getting the wrong people is better than is worse than having no people. Because once you get them in, then you're stuck with them, So
Yeah.
it's easy to rush to just fill empty seats, but then all of a sudden now you've got 20-year problems in each of those seats,
Yeah.
not firefighters. So, but I do my best to go to places that I think would bring the right kind of people to the fire service. So I'm a member of a boxing gym. That's what my son and I do. And I'm just like walking around all the time, seeing young people in there working. Hey, what do you do? Oh, construction. You ever thought of being a firefighter? And they don't even think about it. 'Cause I'm thinking, if you are the kind of person who boxes for fun, like,
Yeah.
I'm
Right.
thinking the
Right. You're
physical
gonna
side
love
of
the
it.
abuse of this
Oh,
job,
oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
Hey, you're a professional. You can come here and be a professional athlete and do good deeds. So,
And
but
get paid, and
yeah,
I mean, and make a livable wage, and get paid. Yeah.
yep, exactly. So,
One thing that's interesting on that note is, and we have several articles as part of this series uh, related specifically to recruitment and retention and staffing. So, real quick, the lack of staffing is the number two most stressful part of the job identified. 94% of respondents said that they have experienced staffing challenges
Mm.
in the past 3 years. I mean, that's crazy. That's huge. And interestingly, in another section of the series, I think it was about 50% of respondents said that their department does not have a strong plan for recruitment. And I think similarly, another 50% said the department does not have a good plan to retain members either. And I mean, we've been talking about staffing challenges for so long, and it's pretty shocking to think how many departments are still not taking active, proactive steps to manage it. I mean, we can't all rely on folks being proactive like you and going to the boxing gym and finding people individually. There's got to be a bigger plan, right?
I would hope there would be one, but I kind of look back to traditionally what has brought firefighters to the fire service, and I think about myself. I'm a first generation firefighter on my side. I'm married. My wife's father is a retired firefighter from California, and had I never met her and then met him, I probably wouldn't be sitting here right now, because I was just a guy going from job to job, working labor jobs. Um, that's just how I was raised. And he was the one who we were building a fence or something. He's like, you might be a good firefighter. You should look into it. And it was back during the recession. And I kind of just fell, ass backwards into it, because I ended up going to EMT school. And my goal then was just, hey, get an EMT license and get a job. And then, of course, you meet people that are like, hey, you need to go to the fire service. You need to go to the fire service. And that's how it had happened for me. It was just if had I not met people who pointed me in that direction, it would have never happened. So we can talk about plans and we can talk about initiatives and stuff, but it's always going to come back to the people who know something about it or are doing it to bring in people. It's our job really to bring in the next generation. And then it's
Yeah.
our job to foster that generation and teach them how to be firefighters after they get here.
But if
Yep.
people are so stressed out and at this breaking point, are they going to feel comfortable trying to encourage people to come, work for the fire service?
So I feel like, no, if they're stressed out, they're not going to tell anybody, because if they're not honest, then what are they? They're not bringing people to a good situation. But as a leader and as a company officer, I did my best to keep our crew busy. I mean, it wasn't very difficult because we were at a busy house anyway. But I don't know where I read this. I've read so much in the last week, but that they said a group that sits in a circle and just stares at each other can't look forward and go anywhere. So you got to wonder, are we just sitting in a circle at a kitchen table and just talking about our stress? And are we stressing ourselves out? Are we just perpetuating the stress? And if that's happening, then maybe an officer needs to break it up a little bit. Hey, let's go outside and let's go pull some hose. Just doing
Yeah.
stuff like that. I'm not saying that's the key, but maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe it is that simple.
Yeah, and what Janelle's talking about here is in the survey. There's a question, about, or a statement about, are we at the tipping point? Because the data point is 43% are considering leaving. I don't think I've ever even thought that we would have a staggering fact like that. And I know personally at my department, we had maybe 1 or 2 people leave in my first 10 years. And then the last 3, we've probably had 10. Are you seeing that same thing?
Absolutely. I mean, but I think it's also a reaction to, we lost so many people. And then we just filled them. We filled the seats really quickly with folks. And I think they didn't really know what they were getting into. I think that's part of it. I think the other part is, if somebody's in a bad situation, what are they typically doing? They're looking at their phone, and what's on their phone? A million opportunities.
Yeah.
They can. So as an officer, you can be talking or coaching somebody about, hey, I want you to be better at this. And while they can be looking at their phone, dropping, 1,000 job applications with a click of a button. So, there are tons of fish in the sea. As they say.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's what was so surprising, though, is that the numbers were so similar. Because when people are frustrated, I was not surprised by the number. 46% said they're considering going to a different fire department, because it's the whole grass is always greener thing, right?
Yeah.
But the fact that it was 43% are just going to leave altogether, not even for another fire department, just leave the fire service. And maybe you're right. Maybe that comes back to the fact that, we hired so many people so quickly and they discovered this wasn't the job for them. But man, that was the stat, the 43%, that really shocked me.
I think too, your point about, are we sometimes our own worst enemy, is that stress begets stress. So if we're starting to become stressed out, we sit in our circle and we start piling on. Well, have you heard about the chief's plan to hire more people? I haven't heard of the chief's. I was mandated yesterday. Oh, I can't believe they mandated. I missed my kids, whatever. And you're right. Like all of a sudden that stress just heightens. So
Yeah.
you mentioned, hey, let's diffuse this. Let's go pull some hose. Let's go work on being better. I mean, what's another strategy you've used?
So one strategy I used as a station captain was, when we were at the table at shift change, I told people, no more speculation, only hard news.
Yeah.
But it was so funny. Hey, what do you think? And I'd say, is that hard news or is that speculation? Because I'm not here to speculate. I'll tell you
Right.
what's happened and I'll tell you what we're doing, but I can't speculate on anything. And it's kind of a joke, but it kind of made people laugh about stuff. And they kind of start thinking, what else have I speculated about?
Yeah, stress myself out about. I like to call it a Jedi mind trick, because if you have children and they're fussing, you just tell them, "Hey, what's something that you like?" And you get them talking about ice cream, or a trip to the lake or whatever. Like firefighters are no different than that, right? Maybe throw in a fart joke, something like that. But you're right though. I when you said that, you're like, yeah, we sit in this circle, we made it, and we look at each other instead of looking forward. I thought, man, that's exactly, I think, sometimes what happens. But let's add this stress. Keep talking about this. 47% stated that stress from the job is negatively impacting their relationships and family. That was another one that kind of stood out and made me go, ooh, now we're almost I think that's why we're almost to this critical point. When you saw that, what was your initial thought?
Again, I feel them because I've experienced it myself. When I was a young firefighter, especially, my father-in-law gave me some advice when I started. He said, don't get a second job. When you're off, go home and just live on the budget. That was very difficult. We were not making very much money. My wife was in nursing school and we had 2 kids under 2. So, it was really, really hard. And then not to mention I was a new firefighter paramedic on a really, really busy ambulance. I was seeing a lot of stuff I wasn't prepared for. I wasn't sleeping. There was just so much going on. And, kudos to my wife, when I finally kind of noticed the symptoms I was feeling and I went and spoke to her, she got me through it. I mean, but I had a support base to get me through it. And she's in the medical field also. So, I'm so lucky to have that, to have a sounding board that she's going through her stuff too. I mean, especially during COVID, she was on a COVID unit.
Oh,
So I'm in the streets doing one side and she's on, the hospital. We just kind of had that, but I was lucky. A lot of people don't have that situation. Their families don't understand what they're going through. Um, it's, and I still experience it when she's not there. I not to get too morbid or whatever, but I ran a pretty serious call just yesterday. I was on it was a scene of a gunshot wound. It was pretty intense situation. And then 2 hours later, I was on my parents' front porch talking to them about, my kids going to Dave and Buster's, and I'm sitting there thinking they don't even know what's going through my head right now, but
yeah,
and it's stressful, and I can see how people can get withdrawn, because that's how you either react, you either withdraw or you lash out, or, then sometimes, which can be worse, you open up and tell them what you saw. Now you've got your family because they weren't ready to hear that message. So
yeah.
it's a really difficult thing to process.
And this brings up policy, right? This is where a department, I think, can really become a benefit with good EAP. And this is where the peer-to-peer stuff, I think, one of the things I got personally from reading the data was the mentoring and the peer-to-peer is really imperative to the fire service. And, when we talk about the brotherhood and sisterhood, I think we need to embrace that now more than ever. A, do you agree with that? And B, are you seeing that?
I agree with it 100%. And absolutely, I'm seeing it because I don't know. I just have to acknowledge we had a funeral for one of our firefighters yesterday. Jordan Melton was shot at the fire station and he died from his injuries.
Yeah.
And so that's why I actually was working yesterday, because I was working overtime so then other people could go to the funeral. So, and it was one of those moments, a lot of people stepped up because he touched so many of us, and a lot of people really wanted to go. And our administration, our fire chief, I got to hand it to them. They made it happen. They paid a lot of overtime to get people out. They have really supported everybody. And I've watched, and what's wild was, Jordan was a young firefighter. He only had a year on. So his recruit class, this was a 30 or so students were all in his class together. And this is their first year on the department, so they're facing this, and to watch them all kind of come together and support one another, it's good. And then for, us to kind of support them. And I feel like we've got a responsibility now to those who graduated with them to say, hey, okay, now there's life after this, because I don't know. One thing I was telling them was, when you join the fire service, you join a big family. And I really do believe that. But unfortunately, when you have a big family, a lot of things can happen, and looking back, I can't remember a year that passed that something significant, tragic happened to somebody I know at the fire service. It's part of it. But it seems like every time you do it, you build and you forge bonds and you get stronger. And
yeah. And sorry again for your loss, and thanks again for being here. I'm glad you mentioned that, and you've had a rough week. You've had a rough couple weeks, and behind the scenes when we were organizing this, Janelle and I kind of just said, hey, we'll whatever time you need, but our thoughts and condolences and support are with you and your department for going through that. And thanks so much for talking about it. And you just bring up a great point. Whenever you go through that, you see the both extremes of the fire service. You see just the heartbreak, and then you see how we as a fire service are so good at stepping up in time of need. And it brings up, I think, reading this data, you can't help but notice we are in a time of need, and we're talking about how to step up. And let's look at leadership for a second. Let's go back to that. After reading this and being a part of just the last couple of weeks, what are some things leadership needs to do to step up and kind of help with this tipping point on stress?
So I'm a newly promoted battalion chief. It's actually been 7 months now, and I've had 12 years to think about what kind of chief I was going to be, and talk about stress and problems, and I do my best to just try to be present for the crews, right? Just when I hear a bad call go out, or I hear any call go out, just going and being with them, even if there's nothing for me, if I'm not dispatched on it, just showing up and being there. And then by doing that, I'm more in tune with them. So when I see someone struggling, maybe I'll be better at recognizing it. And when they tell me a problem, even if it's something I can't solve, just being a sounding board, trying to solve it, even if I lose, that's something, I think a lot of the crews, as leaders, I think we're really quick to dismiss concerns, especially if we know it's a losing battle. I think sometimes the crews need to see their leaders lose on their behalf. That's something really big. I think, look, a leader doesn't need to be the person constantly saying, no, no, no. They say, you know what? I hear you. I'm going to take it and I'm going to try. And that leader can just internalize that. No, this is a losing battle, but that's okay. And go lose and let your crew see you lose, because then they know you're going to try. And just knowing someone's in your court, that's going to reduce a little bit of that stress, something. So.
Yeah. And so let's go to the individual then. And, in the field, we're very good at breaking each other down, but I think, right, with the fire service, we're really good at that. What's the ongoing joke is, the fire service doesn't like the way it is, and we don't like change either, and I think that's kind of what you get in the firehouses. But then on the other side, we're really good at stepping up when we need to. So on the individual basis, let's talk a little bit about solutions to the stressed out problem we have.
So on the individual basis, and I believe that I think we just have a responsibility to educate ourselves and educate each other on stresses. And because here's the thing, this job is going to be stressful. It's always been stressful. That's why I always say this, that's why you get a discount at certain restaurants when they go in there and say, thank you for your service. Bankers aren't getting discounts.
No.
Stress is part of the sacrifice. So you have to understand that you're going to have stress. So as an individual, you're taking that on. When you put the uniform on, you're accepting, I'm going to be stressed out. Now, you've also got to be aware of when that stress has crossed the line. That's part of your personal responsibility. As crew members and friends, you got to look out for your people. But sometimes it's individual responsibility of knowing when you've hit that point of, hey, I need to take a day off. I need to do something. That's part of your responsibility as well.
Well, that ties in with one of the stats that you called out in your article that was really alarming. 32% respondents said that their stress level is negatively impacting the quality of service they provide. Now, a lot of the other stats are related to time with family, ability to sleep, things like that. But I think this is kind of what you're getting at, right? Where it crosses the line, quality of service provided. That's dangerous.
Yeah, it's extremely dangerous. And, and as a battalion chief, I have about 40 people under me now. And I get that phone call, hey, I can't do it today, and I have to sit there and it's like, okay. And I have to sit there and talk to them. And I respect people for doing it. People are calling and saying it. And there's a balance of like, okay, can we just talk and just have like a 5-minute discussion or 10-minute discussion or 30-minute discussion and maybe you'll be okay? Or do you really need time off and you need help and all that good stuff? But when you are doing this job, there's no excuses. When the bell dings, there's no excuses. There isn't. You either can do the job or you can't. So to say that, the stress is affecting the quality of service you provide, it's when we're just talking at the table and you're telling me that's the time to deal with it. And I think that goes back to the individual responsibility. If you feel that way, you got to step up and say it, because we can't read your mind and know what's going on. We can look for, symptoms and the way you're acting and try to step in or whatever. But, if you wait too long and the bell rings and you're out there, something bad happens, that's on you. No matter what's going on, stress, it's your fault. It's the unfortunate reality, but it's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
47. 47% stated that stress from the job is negatively impacting their relationships and family also. So I want to say those two kind of go hand in hand, right? Like first, if it's affecting your family, let's try to address it there. Because I mean, would you think? I mean, my thought is it's affecting the family, and then all of a sudden, it's kind of that last point is it affects the job. Um, you know, what do you think on that particular point?
So yeah, it does start at home. Absolutely starts at home, and because you've always seen the academies where the recruit academy graduations, the chiefs always thank the family. I mean, they always, hey, I want to thank the family because you were allowing them to be with us every third day. You're sharing them with us. So we need to carry that on in our careers and go home and talk to our families about the realities we're facing at work. In my article, I'll talk about being held over on Christmas Day. I worked Christmas Eve, and then the morning of Christmas Day, I get the phone call, hey, I need you for mandatory overtime because we were short. Well, I knew it was coming 2 weeks in advance. I knew it was a possibility. So when I called my wife, she wasn't surprised. She knew, okay, well, she was sad, but we had planned for this, that it was a possibility. And, I think we could do a better job at home just telling our families like what we're dealing with, because it affects them. You're going to be away from home. You're going to be tired. And as a family, you need to make a decision. Is the fire service right for us or not? It's a service. It's a calling. I respect anybody who comes and does it, but not everybody's situation is the same. And some people just don't need to, I'm not saying step away forever. Some people really need to step away for a little while and maybe come back to it. The fire service isn't going anywhere, but the time you have with your family, the time you have on this earth, it's a finite time. So make the best of it the best you can.
Yeah, we had Dr. Rachel Zemlock on, and her and I talked about this particular point too, about one of the ways, and I actually just saw a post on this morning, was the transition from the firehouse to family, going from the firehouse back home is really, really difficult. And one that I never was taught about or even thought about the reality of how that change can be, right? So you go from a battalion chief, yes, chief, yeah, we'll do that. Yeah, you do that, to two screaming kids at home that don't want to listen, to a wife who's just hands it off because they have to go to work. That's a difficult transition to do in 5 minutes, right? And so Dr. Z said, take 30 minutes, work this out with your family, talk about how you can transition from the firehouse to home life. And I think, Janelle is kind of smiling. I know about my next statement, which is the theme here is leadership needs to talk to all of their members to maybe include them on their stresses and what they're going through, and be more open and honest about their challenges. And we need to do the same thing to our families, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the more honest we are with each other, I mean, it's because we're all it's that old cliche, everyone has their own struggle. Everyone's struggling through something. We can't see it.
Yeah.
And the more we can talk about it, the more we're open and you feel normal, I mean, that's, I don't know, just being more open and honest. What do they say? You got to name it to treat it, or whatever the words are, but you have to identify it before you can move forward.
One thing that I think is really interesting that sort of connects almost everything we've been talking about here is, so the number 3 most stressful part of the job identified by the respondents was personnel management. Now that sounds like, paperwork and all this stuff, but there's so much more involved in that. And so it's a stressor. It's stressing people out, having to manage everybody, but it's also the solution too, right? It's a stressor, but it's like, seems like so much of what we've been talking about comes back to talking to your members, communicating, making sure they understand what's happening with leadership, whatever it might be. It's the mentorship. It's like all these things can get tied back into personnel management, not from the admin paperwork pushing part of it, but from the connection with members.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. And when I read personnel management, I started thinking about, obviously I'm a battalion chief, so my day starts with putting people in positions. plugging holes, figuring out who's going to go where. And sometimes it's really difficult when we're really short, because the thing is, it's really easy to look on a computer screen, drag, drop names, and just, okay, my staffing's done. But then to really look at it and say, okay, but that person's trying to get experience on this kind of truck, or this person's up for, promotion. They need experience doing this. This person hasn't got to do, taking all that stuff into consideration and also filling the vacancies. I'm not going to lie to you. It's really, really difficult. It's extremely difficult. But, like you said, that's where the rubber meets the road, putting them in positions to build their careers and get experience, be with people they like, be with people they respect. There's just so much that goes into personnel management that is, it's a real challenge. And I'll be honest with you, coming from being a captain at a really busy fire station to being a battalion chief, my call volume has dropped, but I'm so much more tired when I go home now than I was as a captain. I mean, I would rather run 2 or 3 fires as a fire station captain than, sometimes do what I'm doing right now. But, it's difficult. It takes a lot of work.
Yeah. But it's because you're putting a lot of thought process into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And you're putting a lot into it, which is what I think that's what the survey is saying. That's what we want. We want at least rationale and communication as to sometimes why this is going on. Why are they going here? Why am I doing that? And, even if, hey, this is just the way it had to work out for this day, I'm sorry, I'll help you. Sometimes that goes so far, personally, I think it probably would have been number one, but most of firefighters like me probably didn't understand. I don't know what they thought personnel management. Isn't that leadership? Isn't it the same thing? So I'm thinking it's probably number one. It's just the way it was worded was probably a little confusing for most of us, like me. So
mental note.
Yes, mental note for next time, Janelle. Just maybe you should have me or some other firefighters like. Let's talk about some of the positive things, though. Right? We obviously are doing this podcast because we love the fire service. We write because we want to contribute. People are listening right now. All 5 of you are listening right now. Just kidding. Because you love what you do and you want to get better at it. And I think what we didn't talk about was that aspect of it. And for you personally, that's what you thrive on. That's what you've done. You've even done a TED Talk, by the way. I can't believe I went 30 minutes into this podcast without acknowledging your TED Talk. And by the way, for those of you listening, I think we'll try to link to it. It's a very good job. And we're not talking like a mini TED Talk. We're talking like he's on stage and there's TED Talks behind him and he's doing the, all of the you got the hand gestures, the pauses. I'm jealous actually. You rocked it. But it's because of your passion, right? So let's talk about the good aspects of it. What are you seeing on the other side of this that we need to build on?
What I'm seeing now are some really, really good young people coming into the fire service that are extremely motivated. They're here for the right reasons. One thing I've noticed also is they have education behind them. Like they're not just, they've got some college classes behind them. So they could have which tells me they could have done jobs just about anywhere. You know what I mean? Like they're choosing to come to the fire service. That's a really, really good thing that I'm seeing. And let's see, what else are we seeing? It's just a young bunch of motivated folks who are choosing to come to the fire service, not just ending up here, but choosing to come.
And listening to podcasts like this to make them better, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
But you're seeing
the
seeing
data
that.
backs it up too. Like I mean, despite everything we've talked about, the stress, staffing, far and away, most people would still recommend a career in the fire service. 10 out of 10 was the highest percentage. 35% said they would still, at 10, recommend, which is huge, so there's still a lot of positivity there. People are stressed, but they still love what they do.
I love this job so much that sometimes I have to catch myself because I constantly advocate for people to come to the fire service. Like, I mean, hey, what do you do? Oh, I'm a mechanical engineer. I have this huge job. You ever thought about the fire service? That's like talk about how awesome it is and how much fun we have and how
Yeah.
basically all you do, because ultimately all we really do is we drive around on these parade floats. Little kids see us coming, they wave, and we just show up. And ultimately all we're doing is being nice to people. That's really, we are spreading good in the world. We're not responsible for fundraising. You we just, it's awesome. It's so good. It's the greatest nonprofit ever invented.
Right.
It's
Right.
Nobody's waving at the mechanical engineer, right?
no, unfortunately,
Yeah.
but
Right.
Sorry,
Right.
mechanical engineers.
Yeah. Well, you're right. Show up on scene, solve a problem, which we all love to do,
yep,
and then be nice,
yep,
and then
yep,
hop on your parade vehicle and go to the
yep.
next one.
Ride off into the
Right.
sunset. Hey,
Yeah.
you're welcome. You're
Well,
welcome.
well, and let's but sometimes we're our own worst enemy, right? Well, not more sometimes. A lot of times we're our own worst enemy, and you brought up a good point. Uh, Some of our stress, we got to look in the mirror and go, okay, do I really need to do, a side job, right? Or do I really need to do, that social gathering, right? Or, like you said, sometimes you find yourself going deeper and deeper and deeper in this. But, if we're already stressed out, then you add the passion to it. That's a tough balance, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, it's like you said, we are so attached to it. Just so when we are attached to something and passionate, of course, it's going to stress us out. And Janelle, you actually sent me an article by Greg Rogers, and I was reading it, and he had a link in there to it was a white paper, and it deals with moral injury, and which is a newer term, and I guess it talks about how things compile and how you feel about things, and if it doesn't go that way, you're stressed about it, you were hurt by that,
Yeah.
and it really kind of rung true. You apply it to the fire service. We are so passionate about this job that any slight away from what we think is the right way to do it is going to hurt us,
Mm.
So it kind of goes back to, we in the field looking at agency leadership. Unfortunately, they're dealing with politics. I mean, that's just a reality that they're having to deal with. And what we're doing is life and death, and there's no room for politics out here. Unfortunately, with politics, sometimes you have to compromise things, and just to make things happen. And we just don't get it. And and it's not really our job to get. We're here to do the right thing all the time. No, there's no compromise here. It's always the right thing. So it's really, really difficult on both sides because agency leadership has to navigate through this complicated political landscape, and we're out here in the trenches just asking questions like, hey, what's going on? So but yeah, I just had a little shout out to Greg's article that you sent to me, because it's really, really well written and has some really good stuff in it. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's a great point about the moral injury, because when you're so invested in something, it can make the stress feel even worse, even more powerful.
yeah, and I think when I look back on my career, and the things that hurt me the worst were the times that I saw someone else make a decision that I didn't agree with, and I didn't speak up. I kind of just let it happen because either I was a rookie, or that wasn't my crew, or hey, or I thought, I'm not going to say anything. It's a losing battle. That was not the hill I was going to die on. Those
Mhm.
are the things that really kept me up. And I'll be completely honest. I'm going to say this now. I've seen a therapist myself, and looking back on it, it was for moral injury. I mean, I've sat on the couch and I've poured my heart out. And what's funny about that is uh, I kind of kept it a secret, didn't tell anybody, And we had a young firefighter. We had some bad calls go through, and we all kind of gathered around her, and we were talking to her. And I said, I admitted to her, hey, it's okay to see a therapist. I've done it. Well, this big burly firefighter that, doesn't say a whole lot. He looks at me and goes, yeah, me too. And then this other, oh yeah, me too. And we all and it goes back to being open and honest that, we're all struggling, we're
Yeah.
all, having our issues. So
This is the program to say that, because almost every guest has. I've said it numerous times. As a matter of
yeah,
fact, we've even had a psychiatrist want to do a. She's like, yeah, you do need help, Zam. Let's do one on the air and let's do a podcast. Which I'm totally up to doing, man. Because you, how can you get better if you don't figure out what's going on and
yeah,
really admit, and so yeah, thank you for your honesty. I joke about it, but you're 100% right. Like I believe that should be mandatory. You know, when you talk
Yeah.
about policy, so if you just sit there and don't say a word for an hour, that's fine. That's on you. But I almost guarantee that most people in the fire service would be really, really pleasantly surprised at how refreshing it could be and how therapeutic. Obviously, that's what it's for. So, but talking about therapy, we appreciate so much you being here and your article, and people can read it, obviously with the special report. But your therapy continues here on this podcast because we're going to do things called the hot seat, and we're going to put some questions in front of you. They're real quick questions. We're going to dig into you personally a little bit. These are a little bit sometimes fun, sometimes deep, I guess is how they've kind of gone sometimes. But they're just a great way for us to finish. And we get some user feedback. And my mom and Janelle's mom come up with most of them. So Janelle, what do you got today for the hot seat questions for Ben?
Well, we were kind of just talking about this, so it's a good segue. But how do you personally relieve your work stress? Like when you get home and you are just so stressed out, do you have like a go-to strategy to chill out a bit?
Well, here lately, going to the boxing gym has been really, really nice. Just going in there and just, getting my butt kicked by a trainer, just telling me what to do and doing something that I'm really bad at, and just totally forgetting the fire service and just worrying, just watching how poor I can throw a jab. It's, for a couple of hours. And also my son does it with me. So he and I get to do it together, and it's just fun, doing that kind of stuff. That's probably the one I'm doing the most here lately. Also like to do a lot of fishing and a lot of reading.
Very nice.
Didn't Mike Tyson say everybody's a boxer until you get punched in the face?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's
when boxing lost me too.
And so, well, see, and that's why I say I go to a boxing gym. I don't claim to be a boxer.
I'm with you on that one, buddy. I'm with you on that one. All right. I want you to be honest on this one. How many times did you practice your TEDx talk?
I practice it so much that I refuse to watch the YouTube video because I can't stand it. I can't, like to the sound of my own voice. So it's funny because you have the people who run the TEDx, they do such a good job of like preparing you for the day. And when you get your talk actually whittled down to what it's going to be, it's about 1 month out. And they say, great, now memorize it to the level at which you know the song Happy Birthday. They say you should be able to wash your hands and do things and recite it without even thinking about it. That's the level you have to memorize it.
Wow.
Yeah. So I used to drive to work every day. That was when I was in admin. So I was doing 5 days a week, and I would drive to work, recite it, and then I'd drive home and recite it. So I did it every day, at least 2 times a day. And it was really, really tough. But
you did a great job with it. 90,000 views, over 2,500 likes.
Wow.
Good job on that one.
Well, I appreciate that.
What would be your advice to a firefighter who has been on the job several years and they are thinking about leaving because of their stress and some of the stuff that we've talked about today?
My advice would be, well, first I would just take them out to lunch, just sit down and talk to the person, just kind of figure out what's going on in their life, because there's always something else. But my advice would really just be, maybe take a leave of absence. Don't jump ship too quickly, because it takes so long to get here, that there's so many tools out there now to deal with stress that I would love for them to make sure they've exhausted all those before they make a choice to come out of the fire service. But jokingly, of course, my first thing is, hey, why don't you get a second job at a steel mill or something? Go work in a furnace and see if,
right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
go work a 9 to 5 and then
come back.
Grass is not always greener.
Yeah. So that's the thing. And that's what's funny is I know a lot of people who've left the fire service. I know a ton of people. And, it's funny because every time I run into them, hey, how's it going? Oh, it's great. It's great. But then all they want to talk about is the fire service. And you can tell they miss it so much, and it's like, and I know that day's going to come for me when I step away, and so I'd hate to see somebody step away too soon, when there's all these years of just good experiences and good times that they can experience. I just don't want them to miss out just on some tough times. So
great point.
Exhaust a lot of those resources first, reach out. Very well said. One final one for you. how and what are you doing personally to get better every shift?
What I'm doing is I'm constantly trying to look at the job from the eyes of the firefighter that's youngest on the department. So whoever the rookie is, I try to seek them out and I try to see what they think about the fire service, what questions they have, because looking at the service through new eyes is like the greatest gift. And as a battalion chief, I get to drive around and do it all day. And it's so awesome to just have my love for the service renewed through somebody else's love for the service. You know what I mean? Because then, because by taking on their question and coming back and talking to them about it, now we built a bond. Now we're brothers, or sister, or brother and sister.
Mhm.
That's I don't know. That's just how I do it. Just build bonds with the crews, because that's what we're here to do. Be a family.
Well, very well said, Chief. Appreciate you being here. Thanks again for the insight. You're 100% correct. Just reach out to everybody, have conversations, look around you, try to get that motivation from that new person, and look at things from their mind's eye. And it doesn't take much to stay motivated in the fire service. Just take a look around. Speaking of looking around, you can see this podcast on our YouTube channel. You can also see it on firerescue1.com. Please email us at bettereveryshift@firerescue1.com if you have questions, comments, or any feedback on how we can make this better for you. Please rate and review the show, and most importantly, thank you for joining us. In the words of Battalion Chief Ben Thompson, make sure that you communicate with each other, talk to each other, but most importantly, make sure that we learn something, do something, and share something to make you and those around you better every shift. Thanks for listening, everybody.